don't have a battle guide.
Did Dave survey it? Do an actual survey of
It's
it?
not, we have a detailed map.
Yeah.
We took Dave Graffunder's survey just as far as locating utility lines and things like that. His locations are all together. But that's always the case with utility
Hope there's no
lines.
natural gas line.
Then we prioritize. This is number 2. Fully intended to get over it. Not because we knew that there was anything we did not know, but because of the strategy. Ideally, we wanted something to take the beginning of it, but it seemed like what we would have to do later was probably better preserved. So it turned out we began our work over the Eagle Pass line between the Graham Memorial Building and Frontier. And as it turned out, that site was far more expensive, far better preserved than we thought, and we never got down. We figured there'd be soils containing archaeological artifacts associated with the area. We also knew that the Canadians there was a base hotel. Pretty much without it stand now. We figured we might find traces of some outfit, snakes, sheds, related to that. We also knew that we would find house on these corners of this lot. So we figured, well, there may be some things in the backyard. Anyway, we came out here. Most of what we find, we got lucky to find today, either related to the hotel or related to St. Hogs building, late 1700s or 1800s. When we began, we had a backhoe strip off the topsoil. That was simply to save us time. We were operating, which probably seems like a lot of money, what we transferred by 1930s. But before that, we had excavated a couple of small test pits, so we had a sample of what was being moved. Then we began clearing that surface off. We gridded it into 10-foot squares and began carefully removing each square soil layer at a time. And very quickly, we hit this line of rocks, this stone foundation. And as soon as we looked at the records that we had for the fraternity house, we knew that this didn't fit. There shouldn't have been a wall at that location for the fraternity house. Also, the foundation was continuous, and we knew from photos that the fraternity house stood on piers. So as we began to trace it out, we also realized that not only was the foundation wrong location, but the shape of this structure was very different than the fraternity house, which was about 35 feet square. This building was only about 17, 18 feet deep. And as we traced it out, we got about 70 feet before we started hitting this disturbance through here. There's utility lines across through here. Telephone line here. This is, I think, a sewer line. We're lucky here because the flagging actually says caution telephone line. It's historical archaeology. At one point, we knew where that end was. We knew how wide it was, and we knew that once we got to about here, that we lost it, because this was pretty much disturbed. And so we, based on the location for the foundation, we surmised that it was some way associated with the university. We speculated that it was probably to house students, but that was strictly speculation at that point. We knew that it dated to the mid-1800s or earlier from the kinds of artifacts that we found around the foundation stones. What we didn't know was how long it was. And we figured, well, we have 2 chimney foundations exposed. We have one there. We have another one. Maybe there's a third one, and that's it. Well, one of our graduate students who was researching the property discovered couple of deeds, early 1880s, that kind of answered all of our questions. And
What's her name?
Tricia Sampson. And Tricia was up at Hillsborough, and she discovered one deed that mentioned that there was a row of brick offices on the south edge of this property when it changed hands in 1882. And another one said that the brick row was formerly known as the poorhouse. It didn't say what the poorhouse was. It said formerly known as the poorhouse, and that it measured 120 feet by 18 feet.
Gotcha.
And that was one of the few days this last month that it was pouring down rain during the day. So I took some students out in the pouring rain, and we pulled a tape from that corner out 120 feet, which came all the way over this wall. And we found the other end. The brick, and actually we found the courses of brick after we had the document. Until that point, we just assumed that it was a wood frame structure, probably 2 stories. Courses of brick, because it was brick and not wood. Also, the documents told us that it was a brick road.
Looks like there are two parallel walls that are almost equal, narrow corridor, entry hall.
No, those walls there, every 30 to 31 feet, there was probably a masonry wall that divided the rooms and a fireplace. So if you look over there, that first, closest to the wall, that first kind of rectangular area of stone, that supported a chimney with fireplaces on each side.
Between those 2 fireplaces.
And we also uncovered part of a masonry wall. So the wooden wall will be here. Wooden wall about here. Another chimney. And then this end room is about 16 by 18 feet. If you put a partition here, then that makes both of these rooms comparable sized end rooms.
16 by 18.
About 16 by 18.
Is this brick stuff part of the fraternity house?
No, this is debris from when this building came down. And one thing that, initially when we had this brick, we had these brick curves kind of near where the chimneys would have been, we just figured, well, this, when this building stood, would have been up about here. And what we've done is remove the bottom layer of soil and actually, these were set in trenches, and these rocks still go down a little ways into the clay. If you look here, you see these lines of dark soil. This indicates that this area back here was plowed before this building was built.
It's farmland?
It was a backyard garden, fairly large garden.
Rutabaga.
And most of the artifacts that we find in this soil zone, this is a plow zone. This has all been kind of churned up by plowing. The soil zone up to here. The artifacts we find in there are from the early 1800s. Most of the pottery is pearlwood. And that stuff probably accumulated as refuse from the first house that stood on the front end of the lot. Now what we discovered the last day of excavation is that as we excavated out here, we found very few artifacts in that plowed soil until we got over to here. And then we just started finding all kinds of bags of artifacts. But not in the bags, but filled up bags. And most of the artifacts out here, we found the earlier stuff, but we also found stuff in the mid-1800s. How deep? So this tells us where the garden was after this building. What we don't know still is exactly when this building was built. We think it put up sometime after 1830. Certainly it was there by 1850. We have a letter to the student of 3 from about 7 years.
That makes sense because the enrollment was expanding.
Yeah, the enrollment was expanding through the 40s. 40s and the 50s. So, before the 30s, I don't think there would have been any need for it. But we don't know, the tax records are very spotty, but there is a jump in price in the sale of the property at about 1848 in terms of how many of the present buildings that are still standing would have been there then. Only a handful. There may have been some other frame buildings that later came down, but still you're looking at a fairly small campus.
West of Old East.
No, Old West, Old East, New East and New West went up in the Lake District.
Right. But Person was here.
Person was here. Yeah. First by 1800s, we had Old East, Old West, South Building, Arts Hall, Hyde Hall, and Plain and there was Stewart's Hall, which was a wood frame dining hall, which stood about where New East is. It was dismantled, I think, in the 1940s.
There were about 500 students here.
Yeah.
Which made it a big place.
Yeah, and it was just going great guns, and then the war came, and it took it a long time to recover.
Smith Hall was kind of.
Can't claim it.
And all.
Now, we see some photographs
Well, you used to
or
have a flat
sketches of the
wall.
ballroom.
It was built after Pope's visit in 47. The university was very embarrassed that, here comes his favorite son as the president of the United States, and he had to pack everybody into Gerard Hall.
Oh.
So it was built as a sort of multi-purpose library, ballroom.
Maybe we
And in
should
the
name
18
one of our rooms the ballroom.
Well, if you read about the folks that spent about half of their life dancing.
In fact, the Civil War more or less ended the life of the building indirectly. In the, with the war, student enrollment was down to about nothing. After the war, the university actually closed in the mid-1870s. And I think just in that span of time, this building may have been used as storage or whatever, but I think it just fell into disrepair. So that by the time the university reopened, certainly about early 1880s, if it was even still standing, it was no longer functional.
And changed, right?
Was there another building after the poorhouse before the fraternity house?
No, not. We found no record
So this
of a
was
third.
vacant during that time,
So,
like
yeah,
1870 to 19.
Yeah, from by 1880, there was still enough here that could be salvaged. So I mean, remains had to still be visible, but either as piles of brick or partially standing walls. And I assume that probably by mid-1880s, that all brick that was going to be salvaged had been hauled off. This would have been kind of the backyard for the Central Patterson Hotel from mid-1880s up to the early 1900s. The other kind of interesting thing is we discovered that we really don't know when the fraternity house was built. And cannot find records. We assumed that the fraternity was established on campus in 1885, and the house probably went up about then, but now it's looking that it may not have gone up until about 1950.
What fraternity was it?
Phi Delta Theta.
I wonder if that.
Tricia was saying, well, did he know something that we didn't know? He was just. But I wonder if this might not have resembled poorhouses at the time, and that's why it acquired that name.
That would have been brought over from York.
Do you have any indication of where the entrances were?
No, but we assume that the doors were on this side as opposed to the other side, and that's like I said, that's simply an assumption. Just because there's you have about a 10-foot front yard here. On the other side, as soon as you go out the door, you're on University Park. I mean, this is really hugging the property line. And we do know from Dave Graffunder's maps that the property line is right here on the edge of this stone wall. And it's still possible that there were doorways this way, but it just seems to me that, if for a property that's owned by somebody living in front of the property, it just seems more likely to face this way.
I don't know if you were just saying this, but this maybe the poorhouse may also be sort of some class distinction among the bricks too. And that is that it's usually the kids that
Lesser
these
means.
are all the sons of an elite, but
Right.
those of lesser
Some are
means.
more elite than others.
That's right. Those of lesser means are often the ones that took housing
Yeah.
out in the community, and that was a real important distinction. So
He said
wonder if that plays.
Whatever you want.
So if I wanted to take a brick outside of
I would say cake.
Always take one.
Well, are we gonna go to London?
You can.
Are you
Yeah.
gonna show us?
I'll show you. You can go to the
And then
lab.
let's
You see
pick
some
up
of
a
the stuff.
brick on our way.
On our way back, yeah.
Yeah.
It's like the lug line. We're gonna stop by Grand Memorial. We're coming back here, right?
Nice. Now I have the drawing.
I'll tell you that the hot bricks are the ones that are under Old East, and they're tiles. Yeah, we did a survey under Old East back before they did the renovations, and all the old chimney foundations like this are still there, but the brick that stood on them was all dismantled probably in the renovations back in the 20s, and just kind of stacked. That's a gold mine for the development office if they want to
Well, yep.
give away bricks from Old East.
You're talking to him, right?
We'll be over with our
big
little
donors.
wagons. We gotta get our wheelbarrow and get all these bricks.
Yes.
Was either a bay window or more likely a porch. And we can see this on the aerial photo. It's kind of three-sided brick foundation for that. Here's the chimney foundation, the external fireplace. And here's another foundation stone for one of those piers, which is in line with that one, indicating the corner, then about right here. And there was a shed that was added on to the back of the current house. And from what we can tell, the shed was added when they put in more plumbing. And here's the clean house and the pipe. This is where that shed was. This is all plumbing. And I had always thought that the fraternity house, like all the others on the fraternity road, faced this way. It didn't. It faced straight out this way. And we found a postcard of the front. And it shows that there's a full porch on the front side, and the porch comes about halfway back.
Porch?
South
Porch?
side.
Porch? All right, I have archaeological
And
precedent.
then the bathroom was in the back.
Just going to file that away.
There was some
I want to copy that.
Patricia she had known about it, but had not seen it. But anyway, I'd like to go over and look at some artifacts we found. I'll tell you, we have thousands of artifacts. Mostly it's just the small fragments. Unlike the cavern, we have a cellar where we actually found plates broken on the cellar floor and still laid out there, covered up here. Most everything we have has been trampled as a consequence. The pieces are fairly small, but still important for telling us what we know. We had a lot of ginger here. We have, for the fraternity period, we do have lots of bottles. In fact, here when we were cleaning out, we found a number of holes. Mostly bottle fragments. Lots of window glass. Lots of things. The archaeologists stopped us from these. Yeah. I was just putting the bottles out there. Well, the thing is, what's in the landfill used to be all around everybody's house in the backyard, around the beach.
Parkland. So envisioning the building and the models that come out of this, it has to be placed in the context of all of this. It's almost like it's surrounded by it. And also point out the curbs, the parking lot, which is part of the site.
Yep.
What you want to see from that, I wouldn't know exactly you plan that, and how service will come into the to it. We have to have food service brought in. And and those issues will come in. We have to think through all those, but envision it on the site itself. But also the elevation of the building. If you notice, Graham Memorial is right at ground level, and Moorhead is up almost a half a floor out of the ground. This is a very sloping site, so if you start out at this level, by the time you get to the middle, you probably pick up 2 or 3 feet at the other end of the side. So the level should be down at the sidewalk level. It should be up 5 feet up, so you're just looking down, and you have a basement that's out of the ground. It's a finished basement. So where will the principal rooms be? We sort of think of things as they are, but I was thinking the fellows' room. If you have a garden room, and then you're on that's at this level, or up above that, you have the university room, the entry hall, commons room, food service, all in that level. The next level is staff, and the fellows' rooms, all the workrooms. Should the fellows' room itself be on the third floor, like a tower room, sort of a circular tower where you can have the glass all the way around you, but you're up above everything. You're looking down into space, down the garden.